Welcome to the Exodus Companies podcast. My name is Jared. I'm one of the founders of the Exodus Companies. Guys, today we have an episode that I'm personally extremely pumped up about because
Me
this
too.
is kind of showing you into the future of where we're headed with the Exodus Companies. And I know that to many of you listening to the podcast, this is a fresh podcast to you. Maybe you don't know a lot about the Exodus Companies, who we are, and what our mission is. But I can tell you that the topic of overland is near and dear to us, and it is a part of our company that we're going to be exploring, talking about, and entering into in the very near future. So today, I have one of our team members, Brenton, over here to help explain what we just did up in Maine. So Brenton, why don't you give them a little bit of a background of who you are, what your role is with the Exodus Companies, and then we're going to dive into the North Maine woods.
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Brenton. I work here at the Exodus Companies. So all the media you see right now, me and Jared are mainly putting together stuff. And so I'm on the media team, do a lot of social media, videos, stuff like that. It's really fun. I like doing stuff like this. But that's ultimately what led me into overland. I started watching these guys who would create media and they would go off-road, and it was really cool. And so I would say media is a big part of why I enjoy overlanding in itself.
And
But
he's being super humble. Pretty much every video that is edited currently is edited by this dude. So if you watch our brand TA Targets, if you watch anything from Exodus Companies, anything from Exo Overland, Lantern, Arcane, all of our brands, he's literally buried in his computer every single day running content.
like a caveman in there.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, I know you're being humble, but he literally has his hand on all the content. So naturally, it was exciting for me to get you out on the podcast and show people a little bit behind the veil because you're normally behind the camera.
Yeah.
So talk about that real quick. Okay, this is a little bit of a diversion.
Uh-huh.
How is it being from coming from behind the camera to being in front? And I know you have your own channel as well, but
Yeah.
what's the dynamic like?
So it's a little weird, and I would say that because like I never liked being in front of cameras. And
Yeah.
that's like obviously with doing media, I'm always behind the camera. I'm always like watching, I'm always listening. But recently, the past year, I wanted to change that. I wanted to become better at speaking. And I think, like you said, like I'm working on this channel on the side, and I'm just trying to get better at it. So I'm not as uncomfortable as I would have been a year ago. A
Yeah.
year ago, I would have probably been like shaking and shivering. But yeah, it's a little better than it was.
It's funny, we go through our day-to-day and we talk and we
Yeah.
communicate with people. The second you
Oh.
put a camera in front of you,
Yeah.
everything goes out the window. It's like you're going back to toddler where you can't even create coherent sentences. But what is your channel?
So it's called Outbound Intent. It started, like I said, I want to say about 9 months ago, and it's all overland stuff. I'm very new to overlanding, and we'll probably get into that at a later portion. But it's kind of the channel where I wanted to experiment and grow, and just kind of learn what overlanding is, and kind of take you guys with me on the journey.
And one of the things that happened through that is obviously I've been consuming content, watching content from overlanders for a couple of years. There's a bunch of my buddies in Colorado and out west and stuff. I've seen their rigs, I've seen the things that they've done, and it has appealed to me, but I never really took the plunge. Brenton jumps on board, and about a year and a half later, you're really getting into into overland, and that kind of sparked my interest. And this last trip, I would say, would be my first overland trip.
Yeah.
And we went up to Maine, and we're going to talk about those locations and everything. But in the past, like I've done backpacking, I've done tenting, I've camped out remotely, I've taken my vehicle all over the country in a literal overland. I've gone from state to state, but I've never taken my Jeep in a way where I had to fully rely on what I packed.
Yeah.
From clothing to food, water, fuel.
Yeah, fuel was a
That's
big one. That was a big one.
That's a big one. And I've never really taken that plunge where I really had to rely on my vehicle in a true overlanding sense. So this was super eye-opening to me. I already knew I would love overlanding, but at the same time, I never really took that plunge. So this trip to me was extremely awakening.
Yeah.
And it pumps me up because we knew that overland was part of the Exodus Companies. And I'm going to explain this for a second. When we look at an exodus of culture, there's a component of that we all agree upon, we see our world just consumed where they're at. We see people just punching in, punching out. We drive to our day job, and we do that too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, people just run through a cycle, and ultimately we do that for 50 years, and then we die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just
It's
that's what we
a
do.
cycle. Yeah.
And we see overland as an opportunity for people to experience the world in a different way. And obviously, we talked a little bit about Lantern. Lantern's another brand that we own that it connects you in a different way to nature. But overland has this very, I almost want to say, like primitive aspect where you are
Yeah.
covering distance.
Yeah.
You're not just taking a backpack and disappearing for a day or two. I mean, you can just see everything. And it's near and dear to us to have people reconnect in a way with their world that lets you cover distance and see things kind of around you. So, Brenton,
Yeah.
what would you define overland as?
So I think my opinion has changed over the course of a few months. I've listened to some of like my favorite guys in the industry, and they were asked the same question, and I thought they were going to give the answer of you take your vehicle out and you go off road and you camp, and that's what I used to think it was. But they answered it in a way that was unique, and I actually really liked how they explained it. It's not just vehicles; like you can even call backpacking overlanding.
Yeah.
Like overlanding is just getting out in the middle of nowhere, camping, relying on yourself, and just trying to see new things, but in a different way. You're not going to tourist destinations. Now, obviously tourist destinations are cool, but it's very unique in that aspect that you're on your own. You got to rely on yourself.
Yeah, your planning, preparation.
Yeah.
Your vehicle, your tools. Like, do you even have the skills if something breaks to fix it?
Yeah.
You know, when we were up in North Maine woods, there was a period where we were like 200 some miles away from anybody.
Yeah, there's no towns.
Yeah, so something breaks, something fails. If
Yeah.
the FJ has an issue, the Jeep has an issue, what are you going to do? The only thing you can do is rely on the people around you and your own skill set. And that's the part of overlanding that I personally very much enjoy, is the fact that, you know, it was you and your father, it was me and my 4-year-old that went up, but it was a little community. You know what I mean? You're relying on each other to complete a mission, whatever that mission might be for each individual, but you ultimately can't do it alone. I mean, I guess you could point.
So
you do.
Yeah, so
talk about that a little
that's
bit.
a different aspect. So when I first started, I'm super new to this, but about a year ago, I went to, or I should say a year ago, we got the FJ and I started kind of diving into camping. And there's a lot of state forests in the PA, in where I live in PA. And so I got into a lot of solo camping. So I'd go out for maybe a night or two and I'd solo camp. Now, arguably, it was very like easy. There's no like hard trails. It's very simple. So in that aspect, it's not scary. But yeah, when we do these big trips, like no questions asked, I would not go alone. And even when me and my dad started talking about going to Maine, I was like, it would be smart to have somebody with us. And of course, Jared with his Jeep came to mind first. Because if you go alone and your vehicle's done, like let's say something blows, your engine blows or something like that, how are you getting out? Like,
Dude, you
gotta
lose a
hike.
bolt. Like,
Yeah,
that's the thing.
true,
It doesn't even have to be major. It could be
your,
like
your ball joints
hey,
just fail. Yeah.
I had a U-joint go bad. It's like, oh, and I forgot a jack. It's like, oh, well, I can do that anywhere. I've done it on my Jeep on the side of the road. But it's like, what if you forget a tool?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And you kind of rely on each other in that situation. And they invited me to go up to North Maine woods, which is where our final destination. I mean, there wasn't really a final destination. We
were just kind of roaming through.
But I got invited, and at first I was a little bit apprehensive. I was like, man, the only thing that held me back was the vehicle aspect. It's like, man, I spent a lot of money on my Jeep. It's a little unique, and we'll talk about the builds. There's some quirks with my Jeep that you just can't fix unless you have the part already on hand. But ultimately, when they invited me, I ended up saying yes. I had to do a ton of work, a ton of prep. That's part of the fun of the overlanding, is I had to prep my vehicle for that experience. But ultimately, I'm very glad that you guys invited me, and it really opened up my eyes. So before we really talk about where we went, why don't you give kind of an overview of the FJ, why you built it the way you did, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Jeep.
Yeah, so basically, FJs have always been, now I might offend some people here, but I think they're kind of ugly, stock FJ Cruisers.
You did a video on that.
I did do a video on that.
You should check out his channel.
And I made a lot of people mad. But ever since I was a kid, I had this unique, like, I don't know, I really liked the FJ. And I don't know why. I knew they were ugly, but I knew you could make them look cool. So I would say last July, my dad, he needed a new vehicle for the side because his other like alternate vehicle was going bad. So he got this totaled, and we do this a lot. My dad like loves to buy totaled cars and fix them up, and I've done 2 of my own that were totaled and fixed up. So this thing was smashed in the front end, and that actually was good because that gave us the opportunity to do a lot of cool stuff to the front. Like, one things I don't like about FJs are the bumpers up front. Not the biggest fan, and same with the headlights. So that all kind of changed, and that's ultimately how we started on the journey of fixing up the FJ. And then we got the tent, we got rotor packs, we got awnings, we got tires, and I'm still refining a lot of things with the FJ. There's a lot of stuff that I need to, and we can talk about that later.
We will, for sure.
There's a lot of stuff that needs to be changed, but
we came back with a laundry list of, hey, what are we going to do different next time? And I think we both have probably 20 different checklist items on that. But that's kind of one of the other unique aspects when we're talking about vehicles, is the fact that you're going to come back from a trip saying, man, I wish I would have done something a little bit different. And again, we'll dive into that. So the FJ is pretty cool. It was a father-son project. You guys work on it together. You've done a lot of modifications, but the cool thing is you picked a vehicle that's extremely capable right out of the box.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's probably one of the most capable, I would say, smaller side SUVs. Obviously, 4Runners are there too, but they're very unique, and I think that's why I like FJs. I think 4Runners are more practical as far as overland. You have a little bit more space, but FJs are just unique, and I really love that aspect.
You definitely don't find many vehicles around the Jeep Cherokee size, the FJ Cruiser size, the 4Runner size. There just aren't that many vehicles that are, I should say this, there's plenty of vehicles in that size. Very few of them are capable. Where I would actually trust taking them on, trails that would be in our area, the off-road parks, they'd be blues and blacks. They would be very difficult rated trails. I just wouldn't want to take many of the vehicles in the market out there. Not without extreme modification, and that runs its own risks. I'm going to talk about my Jeep real quick because of that. So my Jeep Cherokee, it's a 1999 Cherokee XJ. Very classic, very iconic vehicle. It's historic in American history. Very few vehicles were produced in the numbers of the XJs or had the track record of the XJs. I've owned multiple XJs over my my current lifespan since I've been driving, and I've loved every single one of them. This particular XJ is very unique. I've owned it now for 12 years, and in that period of time, I've had 4 different lift kits, I think, on it.
I didn't even know that.
I think I've had 4 different lift kits. I've swapped the front differential 2 times. I've swapped the rear differential 3 times. The transmission has been swapped 3 times. Transfer cases 3 times. It's had technically 3 different engines.
I was just saying, I thought you had 2 or 3 engines in there too.
I have absolutely taken this Jeep everywhere you could ever ask. It owes me nothing at this point, but I did something unique in 2018, and I ripped the straight 6 4.0 liter out of it, and I put an OM617 turbo diesel. It's a Mercedes-Benz engine. This is my poor man's G-Wagon because I can't afford a G-Wagon, and anyway. So I put a Mercedes-Benz power plant in it. It's a 1985 engine. The beauty of it is it's an all-mechanical diesel, very simple. There are quirks. You can't find parts at an auto parts store. You can't buy stuff at AutoZone for this in many cases, but it gives me the ability to be extremely fuel efficient. It runs very cool on the trails. I don't have a lot of water temp issues because of the way this diesel engine works, and I have plenty of power, and it sounds cool. Like at the end of the day, hearing that turbo just singing, it's so sick. So I've got a 6.5-inch long arm lift kit on it. I've got just the stock Dana 30 front that has some modifications to it, Dana 44 rear, locker, 35s. Everything about this Jeep is set up the way that I want. And it kind of was originally intended to get me to hunting spots. That's the whole reason that I built my Jeep, is up in northern Pennsylvania. I go back in the middle of freaking nowhere, and I go in 1.5 feet of snow. And in the past, I've always had to park and then walk like a mile. And I just was like, I'm done with that. I want to have a vehicle that I could put a winch on, that I have lockers, that I have enough ground clearance, that I'm able to go to these places that normally I would have to walk. And that kind of rings true with Overland. I mean, that started this whole progression and this whole build.
And it's so iconic too. I don't know how many times when we've stopped for gas or whatever, like somebody comes up to the XJ and is like, It's just loving that thing.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I cannot go to a fuel station without somebody coming up and being
Yeah.
like, "Is that thing a diesel?"
Yeah.
It's like, nah, it's just got a bad rod knock. It's
Yeah.
just a 4.0 that's clapped. Nah, it's a diesel. But
And I think the funniest thing that I will always remember, I think this is the first time I ever, this is like almost 2 years ago when we went to that one trip and we were filming and this guy like followed us off the interstate.
I'll
And
tell that story
yeah.
then. That's so bad. Can I tell it quick?
Yeah, go for
Okay,
it.
so we're pulling off the turnpike. This dude comes flying up. He's in a BMW.
Yeah,
It was one of the
BMW, yeah.
SUVs, X3, X5. I don't remember. But he had the M57 diesel engine in that. Like you could buy that model SUV with the straight six turbo diesel from BMW. And it's a solid motor. I actually considered putting that in my Jeep. Anyway, we pull into the gas pump and he gets like on the exit, he was on our butt, pulls up right behind us. And he's like, "Is that thing a diesel?" And we started talking a little bit. And anyway, for a couple minutes in, and then he's like, "I think I watched a video of someone doing a diesel swap on their XJ. It was Keystone." I was like, "Keystone Carry."
Yeah.
He's like, "That's it. That's the one." I was like, "That's my YouTube channel." And it was just hilarious because people connect the dots. And I was actually filming out at a local spot. It's Middle Creek in Pennsylvania. It's a little nature preserve or whatever. I was filming on the side of the dirt road, and this dude it's a Dodge diesel pickup drives by, stops, backs up, and he hops out. He's like, "Wait a minute, you're turbo diesel XJ." I was
That's
like,
so funny.
"What? What in the world?" So anyway, I also have my own personal YouTube and Instagram channels. It's just turbo diesel XJ, all one word. And yeah, I mean, it's iconic. It
Yeah,
has built
really
a
is.
following at the time of recording. I think it's around 30,000 followers
almost,
on
yeah.
28,000 something, which is insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. I make a post and sometimes 100,000 people see it,
It's
which
just
is
crazy.
wild. And media is near and dear to us.
Yeah.
And it's because through media, we can affect culture. We can affect change in culture. And I'm not necessarily sitting here telling you that through this podcast or through overlanding or through whatever else that we're trying to just shove stuff down your throat. But we do want to open your eyes and give you an opportunity to see the world a little bit different. Maybe you're not going to believe everything that we do to a T. Maybe you're not going to go out overlanding, but you might just like watching our videos. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
it gets people pumped up to experience life. And that gets me excited. That gets you excited as well. So we talked about the vehicles a little bit. What made you and your dad determine that North Maine Woods was where you wanted to go? And ultimately, let's talk a little bit about the planning and the prep building up to the trip.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question, and this will lead into further conversations for sure. East Coast Overland, and I've talked about this quite a bit, is a little bit different in the aspect that it's really hard to find good overland spots. There's tons of off-road parks, and off-road parks are fun.
They're fun for that Saturday that you go, and then you're like, "Hey, I just beat my vehicle up and I
exactly.
traveled 3 miles."
You don't know how many times I used to go there all the time, and you'd come back to the parking lot, and like you talk to people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I just I ran into a tree or shoved my fender into a tree," and I was like, "Oh man," it made me cringe a little bit. And it's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, but I hate the thought of going to like this small place to do off-roading. And what really made me want to go to Maine is, well, first of all, my dad, he wanted to go to Katahdin, and I was interested, so I was looking into it, and I realized that there's all these logging companies up there. It's like I think it's 3.5 million acres of just
No
private
matter what
land.
the number is, it is absolutely
it's
absurd.
massive. Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that.
Me neither. Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's all private land. So you actually do have to. There's like checkpoints on the edges, and you go in and pay a fee, and basically you're free to roam, do whatever you want. But the reason that we went to Maine is that's like the biggest place I believe on the East Coast, and I could be wrong. I didn't actually do research on this, but it's one of the only places where you get that much land and that much freedom to roam. There's a lot of big state forests around here, but the problem with that is there's also a lot of closed roads. They put gates over roads, and that's actually maybe changing a little bit. I don't know if I told you this, but in some of the state forests, I just saw they put out this thing. They opened up a bunch of those roads, but
and I do want to dive deep into that.
Yeah.
I want to, and I think I'm going to apologize ahead of time for everybody listening right now. There's going to be a lot of podcasts that are going to cover this topic. I don't think in this podcast we can go as in depth as we really truly want to, but I do on this podcast want to talk a little bit about the nuances of East Coast overlanding.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue on. What got us? What made you guys want to go up to Maine?
So yeah, that was honestly the biggest thing, is we just wanted a free place to roam, just go wherever you wanted and still be off-road. And yeah, there's also a lot of spots in North Maine woods that you can actually like truly go off-road. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of main roads, like logging roads, where the logging trucks will literally come flying right by you.
Oh yeah,
But but
terrifyingly fast. I
Yeah.
feel like they don't care
No,
about
they
their
don't care.
rig
Yeah.
at all.
They
I'm watching their trailers do like 50 down these roads that we're doing 20,
and there's
I'm
potholes.
getting, I'm
everywhere.
getting beat.
Yeah.
I'm like bouncing around and stuff, and they're just like, whoa,
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah, if you don't get over, yeah, it's,
You will die.
Yeah, it's not a pretty sight. But
80,000 pounds of logs, just like
yeah,
50 miles an hour on back roads. Cool.
Yeah.
Done. We
Yeah,
checked
so
that
that
box
was-
off.
that was interesting. But to your next question, the planning. So there was a lot of planning involved with this, and I think we had to sit down once or twice, like with the plan.
Full disclosure, I planned nothing. You planned everything.
But
I was like,
you
hey,
helped with
you just tell me where I need to go, which I felt a little bit bad. But
Well, no, it was actually enjoyable. I wanted to learn how to plan a trip like this, and what I did, I think the biggest thing I learned is that planning a trip like this, it's not going to go as planned.
Yeah.
And so I created this route through North Maine woods. I found our camping spots or whatever, and I kind of expected this because I watched videos on this, but up there in North Maine woods, there's a lot of bridges that are totally gone, destroyed,
Yeah.
and you don't know it. You don't know that, which I actually kind of enjoy.
You don't
Like-
know it until you're about to pull onto it.
Yeah.
Like that's the part that's crazy.
Yeah. And like in the moment, I was a little bit frustrated because we had to do a lot of workarounds to find different roads and like off-road shoots. But I think the biggest thing is like at the end of the day, it's like kind of cool that you get to explore. Like,
Yeah, but how much less fun would it be if you just planned your? Let me back up. Every time we drive somewhere, we put our GPS in, and we're guaranteed to get where we're going.
yeah, true.
Think about that.
It would be
That's
kinda
our
boring.
existence at this phase of humanity.
Yeah.
We pull up Waze or Google Maps or whatever you like to use, and it just takes us there.
Yeah.
There's no excitement.
There's no
there's no
Yeah.
risk. I mean, there's always risk,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
there's
no
not-
thought behind it. You don't have to look at, I don't know, like topographic maps or anything. You just,
Yeah, you
just
don't-
punch it in.
you know, I watched you and your dad lay a topo map on the hood of the
Yeah.
FJ
Yeah.
because we had no cell service.
Uh-huh.
The guy at GPS, for whatever reason, wasn't showing
was-
all the roads. It worked really good though.
Yeah,
but
that was amazing. It helped.
didn't show us where we needed to go. So what else do you have but a physical compass, some pens, and a little bit of ingenuity, and then you roll the dice?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly.
So that's, to me, looking at the challenges that we did face, to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that makes you grow as a person. I think that our culture in general is averse to challenge. We want comfort. We want the easy route. And that's probably why overlanding is appealing in so many ways to so many people. And I want
Yeah.
to talk about that a little bit because over the last couple of years, I personally feel like I've seen an explosion of
Oh, yeah.
overlanding.
100%.
So do me a favor and just kind of back up a little bit. What's your take on that? Why do you think it's exploding?
Yeah, so I'll go back even a little further and explain how I got into overlanding, because this is exactly why I think a lot of people got into overlanding. So as a kid, I grew up going to these off-road parks on four-wheelers, and after, I don't know, I think it was about a year and a half ago, I got into another, I rolled my four-wheeler again. I don't know how many times I rolled the four-wheeler. And at some point, I
So
was...
you suck at driving four-wheelers.
Yes, essentially, yes. but at one point, that was like the last time that I went with the four-wheeler. I've gone back with full size because I love full size. But I had this thought of like, why should I come out here and like, I love off-roading, but come out here off-road, but then just like go back home and not really see anything. That's the biggest reason I wanted to see stuff, but I wanted to see like stuff off-road. And so
That's what led you into that idea
Yeah.
where, let's do something bigger than just riding a four-wheeler around.
Yeah.
And,
yeah,
just kind of winging it.
Yeah, so that was a big aspect of it too. But I think probably one of the biggest things is, once COVID kicked off.
Ooh, he said the
I
C
said,
word.
said the word. But once
Banished from the internet. There's a disclaimer at the bottom. It's right there. You can't see it. But warning, COVID has been mentioned in this podcast.
vaccines are
Oh, no. Beep. Cut that one out. Jeez.
um,
There's an attack drone above us. Anyway, onward.
but-
COVID was a period of time in humanity that changed a lot.
Yeah. So
no matter where your position is on that, COVID changed everything.
Yeah. And I think one of the reasons that COVID changed everything, especially for overlanders, is they realized that like travel is, you had to rely on everybody else. You had to, get airplanes, and for a while there, you couldn't really ride on an airplane. And same thing with just like travel in general, anywhere, like food, everything. And I think it just blew up because people, they wanted to be able to go explore, but not have to rely on anybody for that. Just go do their thing. I think that's probably the biggest reason.
I would agree, and I think there's a cultural shift.
Yeah.
I think that as technology rapidly increases, humanity has this craving for the primitive. We have a craving to reconnect with nature. There's a lot of people that talk about getting grounded, being with nature, and there's a lot of other, people have their own things. You know what I'm talking about? There's a lot of stuff that people see. I just see it as we are naturally born of the earth. You know what I mean? We come from literal dirt. That's where we were created. That's my belief.
Yeah.
And
absolutely,
we do have a calling to experience the world, not just a brick building, not just a concrete building, not just the day-to-day mundane crap that we end up floating through. And I think that as that whole period in 2020 to 2021, 2022 even, I mean, we're still in this weird era.
Yeah.
But people are naturally craving a reconnection with the world around themselves. And overland is a great way to do that. Now, there's some barriers to entry that I would say.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we're talking about vehicle overlanding, the vehicle is a barrier of entry, sort of.
Yeah.
But maybe talk about that a little bit, because what we realized going up to North Maine woods, we said it often, because you have a Subaru Baja that you're building up.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a...
It's a project.
Yeah, it's a project.
That's for another day. We're going to dive deep into that at another point.
Yeah.
But we often said, hey, I think the Subaru probably could have done this.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some perceptions of barriers to entry. Maybe that's not a reality. What do you think?
Yeah, so honestly, it depends on what you want to do. Like if you want to rock crawl, there's I would say a big barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Because you have to do a lot of stuff to be able to do rock crawling. But if you're just going out overland, you want to do some trail riding, maybe some like easy trails, and even state roads, like they can get bad sometimes, or state forest roads, I should say. But you don't need anything special, and most of the time you don't even need high clearance.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. And I think anybody could take their SUV. I probably wouldn't recommend a car, but something probably with 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, and you could go out and camp, find some place to camp in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say it's probably not. The barrier of entry isn't as high as people think it is, because everybody sees, like on Instagram, they see all these beautiful rigs just loaded out, and and
honestly, we're kind of guilty of that in a way, because like you look at the FJ, you look at the XJ, and it's like, whoa, maybe you don't have a vehicle like that. Remember, it took me 12 years to build the XJ into what I've done now. And yeah, I've got a ton of money and time into it, but I'm just like you. I'm not some ultra wealthy dude that's making $1 million a year that can just go blow 150 grand on a new Tacoma and put all the gear on it. And I don't have people sponsoring me at this point. I've been paying for my stuff. You know what I mean? I buy the stuff that you see me running. And at the end of the day, it's taken me 12 years to do that. So that's the other thing that I would say is maybe there are some limitations with your vehicle as you're getting into it. Maybe you just be realistic about what you can and can't do, and you just be open-minded, and then you modify slowly over time.
Yeah.
I think it would be foolish for people to look at a Jeep like mine and be like, okay, so for me to take my XJ and be able to do what you did, I need to go get a Mercedes engine. I need to get an adapter kit. I need to tear the whole drivetrain out. I need to do all this stuff. It's like, no, actually, it could be stock.
Yeah.
Honestly, a stock Cherokee, if it's in healthy condition,
it's more than capable.
More than capable. Enough ground clearance. You got selectable 4-wheel drive. I think that's important. Not necessary in all situations, but being able to pull into 4-low with a lever. I love that.
Yeah.
I love a lever that goes ka-dunk, and I just tell it, you are now in 4-low, and you can't fight me.
Instead of pushing buttons.
There's no solenoids. There's no like weird stuff. You can't decide to short out on me. I put you in 4-low when I want you in 4-low. There's certain things about your vehicle that could limit you, but I don't think it's quite what people think. You don't even need a rooftop tent.
No.
I know that's the trendy thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, it makes it really nice.
It is really nice.
It is super nice.
It is nice. Yeah.
I cannot stress that enough. A rooftop tent is king. However, you could take a ground tent that you buy at Cabela's or something, or whatever store you shop at. That wasn't a plug for Cabela's, but are we allowed to say that? But anyway, you could take whatever tent that you have and go tenting.
Yeah.
You pack it in your vehicle, and just go. You could sleep in a hammock if you wanted to. You could hang that between 2 trees and go out. I know people do all
Yeah,
kinds of different
and
things.
I know I've seen a lot recently rock crawlers, so they won't get a rooftop tent, which I understand because
Totally understand.
there's a lot of like with the FJ, there's some body roll, you can feel it. There's weight up there and it's high up, so your center of gravity obviously goes up. But yeah, like it's a very common thing to just use a tent. Like it's not like in order to get into overlanding you have to buy a tent.
And I think that, again, humanity's craving a return back to the simplistic aspects of nature and everything. But we lie to ourselves through social media, and people think that you have to do all these crazy things in order to be an overlander. It's like
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
You look at Subarus, and like there's a cult following,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're very similar. I mean, everybody's different, but there's similarities. Look at the XJ crowd. Half the time, I wonder why I'm part of it.
Yeah.
Just do me a favor, go on Facebook, look up XJ
Oh
Jeeps.
no. Oh no.
Just please. Most of my YouTube content, the ideas comes from that page. That's all I'm gonna say. And it's gold. It's like a gold mine of why
Yeah.
am I part of this crowd. But at the end of the day, the vehicles, many of them are gonna be capable. Just be realistic. Don't put unrealistic expectations on yourself. So we got the vehicles out of the way. People kind of have a background of what we did with our vehicles. Why don't you kind of lay out what your objective of the trip was? You did the pre-planning, you picked out where we're going. Let's talk a little bit, and I don't want to go too far day by day, step by step, but
Yeah.
what was that path? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I think the main objective was just to see what was up there, because it's one of those spots where I was like, I could see us going back just from doing
yeah.
research, and so I wanted to see what actually was up there. So the first day we shot up to New Hampshire, went through the White Mountains, and that's another interesting.
Which was gorgeous.
It was gorgeous. I was gonna bring up my little mishap
Go for it.
that I learned in March. So in March I went up with the FJ, and we got like a foot of snow, and like I said, I'm still like I'm never gonna pretend to be this expert overlander or rock crawler.
But you went alone too. That's the funny part.
Yeah.
You had a buddy.
Yeah.
But
we
one
went
vehicle
alone.
in the winter
Yeah.
in New Hampshire with snow on the ground.
Yeah. And so I was a little dumb and I didn't do my research that time. And that's honestly where I learned to start planning this stuff. But all the camping was closed, all the off-road camping, and I didn't know this. So we went up and we didn't have a camp spot. So I tried to drive up this road into the mountain, and I didn't get very far, and I kind of hit a tree.
He kind of hit a tree.
Because
He
the snow.
waffled the side of it.
Yeah. But yeah, so we went up through the White Mountains, and then we spent, what was it, 3 days in North Maine woods.
Yeah.
So that was, yeah. And then after that, we just kind of went home.
But we kind of went, correct me if I'm wrong, because here's one of the negatives that I see of the trip. You sent me all the Gaia layout for the maps, and
Yeah.
I forgot to download everything. So for most of this trip, I was flying completely blind.
Oh, yeah.
I just turned
yeah.
my phone off because there's no cell service up there. You have
Yeah.
nothing. If you download the maps, you can use them and obviously function just fine. But that's why, like, as we're talking back and forth after the trip, I don't even remember, like, the road names. I don't remember what the campsites
Yeah.
were called because I had nothing. I'm just flying blind. So next time that we go, I'm going to be spending a lot more time understanding where we're headed. But anyway.
Yeah, so I think one thing I do want to talk about is the first day, because I think that was probably one of the most interesting days as far as, like, problems coming up.
Yeah.
But it was smooth sailing in the morning. We woke up at our first campsite along this lake, and we headed out, and we were probably 30 miles in, and the roads were pretty. They weren't anything to.
Yeah.
They're basically just dirt roads. But I found this offshoot on the map, and it looked pretty cool. It looked like it had some like it was very rocky, and it looked like it was a good off-road trail. And so we got like halfway through it, and then we got to this turn, and there were just bushes. You couldn't see and there's a little bit of a trail there, but obviously hasn't been used in probably months, maybe longer. Who knows?
Probably longer. I mean, some of
Yeah.
those trees sometimes are like 3 inches in diameter. It's like, well, that's probably like 5 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so we decided to keep going down this because it's connected with our other road to the campsite. And so we went down probably about a mile. We were doing a lot of bushwhacking, just kind of knocking stuff down. Even got the chainsaw out for a little bit.
Yeah, I brought the Husqvarna
Yeah.
20-inch because you just never know.
Yeah.
It's one of those
It's very
things. I
smart.
just
It was
packed it in the Jeep, and I was glad I did.
Yeah, that was one of the things you mentioned before the trip, and I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even think of that. That's very smart. You always want to bring that.
Dude, when I go to the cabin in the winter, I throw the chainsaw in the back.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times you're on a main road and you're like, oh, I'll be good. They'll plow it. Or even if it's not plowed, good to go. But then you come across like this little 4-inch tree, but it's
Yeah.
like 4 feet in the air, and you couldn't just drive over it.
Yeah.
It's like, but hey, if I had my chainsaw in 5 minutes, I could have this
Chop it
whole
up.
road open.
Yeah.
Talk about being capable of taking care of each other. We talk about having an impact on the community. Sometimes having a chainsaw is a good way to do that.
Yeah.
You know? But anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just tooting my own horn.
Well, yeah.
I brought the Husqvarna.
Yeah, he thought of it, but
Yeah, it was my idea. That chainsaw is one of those things that I bought at home. I don't use it enough.
well, now you can.
You know, I got some wear and tear on the bar and the blades there. So
Yeah.
we're good.
But we got down to the bottom of this. We kept going, and there was this, I should say, bridge. It was what, like 2x6s. They were like soggy 2x6s laid across
It
this
was
like.
pretty bad.
4
I actually
foot drop.
wanted to go across it.
Yeah, you did. And
I was trying
like,
to find ways, but it was probably like a 10-foot drop in this
Yeah.
ravine with a sketchy freaking little bridge.
Yeah, there was no structure there. Like, yeah, that was not good. But we got there and we were debating about turning around. And honestly, I was like, what did I say? I think it's not even a debate, something like that.
Oh, you shut it down.
Yeah, I was like, no, because my thought is like, I don't want to, especially on these overland trips, like something like that could totally destroy like everything.
Well, it could destroy vehicles.
Yeah,
That's
it would just destroy it.
I do want to make one point. In the relationship between you and your father's the risk taker,
Yes.
which is really funny.
Yes.
Because your dad's like, just freaking send it.
I'm like, oh, hold up.
And Brent's
Let's
over
think
like,
about this.
No,
Yeah.
the answer's no. We're not taking the FJ over that. No. And I'm
Yeah.
over here with Ed like, I think we could figure it out.
Yeah, and I think because
He's like, yeah, I think we could probably work our way around it. And he's like, no, we're not doing it.
I don't know how to word this. I think I'm a very analytical
Yeah.
person when it comes to
You're
that. Like
not-
I weigh the pros and cons, and I'm like, what does this actually give us?
I don't
But-
think you're risk averse. I think you're willing to take risks.
Yeah.
But you
It
take
depends.
calculated risks.
Yeah.
That there's not a high level chance of something going bad.
Yeah.
Which I think it's good to have that personality on the team, because I think if it was just me and your dad, we would have sent it.
Yeah, got in the vehicle.
Because I think one vehicle would have made it. I think the second vehicle would have been screwed.
Yeah.
Potentially.
But I'm really glad we didn't, because then when we came out and went to that road, there wasn't even a road there, and it looked like there was at one time, but there was trees down it. Like, people haven't been by there in years, and that's the reason that bridge wasn't even there, because nobody's gone up there in years. But yeah, that was one interesting thing. That
What's the lesson from that? What's that lesson from that day?
I think the lesson is probably two of them. One, that like no matter how much you plan, there's gonna be issues, and that's one thing that I have to keep myself in check with, because I'm very, I don't know, what would you say, like structured in a way.
You're type A.
Yeah. And so like,
and I mean that in a really good way, because that strength, the strength that you have to be analytical, precise, to be well thought out, allows you to thrive in those moments that you can control those things.
Yeah.
And that personality can also put you in a box a little bit.
Yeah.
Where when
exactly.
things are kind of going haywire, you kind of need a person on your team that's kind of like, screw it, let's just go.
Yeah.
You need a balance of those personalities. You know, Ethan's behind the camera helping us run, and he's very much the screw it, just send it mentality.
Yeah.
And in our relationship growing up together, that was him, and I was more of the, I don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes he has to push me to go to the next level, and sometimes I have to be like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think
it's a good for team building, is like when you're building a team, which one other thing I thought of during that trip is like having those different personalities, which they will clash for sure, but it's also good for the mission.
It's healthy. It's healthy to experience that. So I think I would agree. I would echo the fact that, you know, I was a little concerned turning down some of those trails. Number one, because my Jeep is freshly painted in 2020, and I'm just watching this brush. I don't even know what this crap was.
Me neither. I don't
it's
know
like
either.
this like thistly crap.
Yeah.
It's like laurel here in Pennsylvania, but worse.
Yeah, it was big.
It's like sticks and just dragging down the side. Now, I did ceramic coat my Jeep before the trip, and I don't have many scratches. So
I do.
10 out of 10 for doing a ceramic finish on your vehicle.
Yeah.
It's expensive and it does take a lot of work, but it saved my clear coat, so I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we continued onward. What was the campsite like that day when we landed?
So that was right on the lake. I think it was, I forget what it's called. It's like Pleasant Pond or whatever. It was very cool, actually. It was cool to wake up in the morning to like.
That was
being
the
right
bear
on the
night.
That was
We
the
heard
bear night.
crashing. We heard
Yes.
the crashing. Woke up at 5 in the morning or
There
whatever.
was like something big in the water. It had to be a bear or something.
I think it was a bear.
But yeah, so that was cool. And then the next day was like, I would say the same thing. There was not as big of an issue, but we had to go around a few different places because
What kind of mileage did we cover the first and second day? Because I think wasn't the second day more mileage?
yeah. So it was. I planned the first 2 days to have around 50 miles, and this was important when planning because like I wanted to make sure our gas situation was good. So I think both days we overshot by like 20, 30 miles. So I think it was like almost 70, 75 miles.
But it took us about 8 or 9 hours to
Yeah.
cover that. Think about that. You're
Yeah.
covering 50 to 70 miles in 9 hours.
Yeah.
You wake up, it's dark. You're getting ready to pack up, eating breakfast, and you leave, and it's freaking dark when you pull into your next
Yeah.
campsite,
Yeah.
which is a little bit nerve-wracking when we're finding all of these situations and these issues where we're getting these roadblocks or bridges out, and it's like, we need to get to our campsite.
Actually, I want to go back to the first night. I didn't even touch on
Yeah.
making our own trail. So after that whole bridge situation, we worked our way back out, and what did we find? It was like some old logging area, and
What is that, like the moose swamp we called it? Was that day?
yeah.
Yeah,
That
I
was-
just, in my head, I feel like moose path. It just like
Yeah.
sticks in my, I don't know why. It just felt like, I mean, one, it's moose territory.
Yeah.
Two, it's not even a trail.
No, it wasn't even on anything.
Oh, and our roles flipped in that. Remember, you guys were about ready to pack up and turn around. I was like, nah, screw it, let's just go.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
me, the
remember
more
that.
reserved, like, hey, I don't really want to go. We got to a point where we were trying to find a way. We couldn't find a road that got us to our destination, and we just got to this point where the trail stopped.
Yeah.
We were in the woods, and it just gets overgrown. And it's like, well, at this point, we've already freaking scratched the clear coat.
Yeah.
What does it matter if we do it for another couple hours? You're just making badder.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be buffing and polishing anyway, so freaking screw it, let's send it. We had a quick conversation, we sent it. I'm so happy that we did,
Yeah.
because we ended
100%.
up in this like swampland
Yeah.
that it was crazy because like the ground, if you would bounce on it,
It's like Jello.
20 feet around you would wiggle.
Yeah.
And it's all held together from grass. And if that grass wasn't there, you're screwed.
Yeah, you'd sink.
We were actually, we got to a point where it's like clearly swamp.
Yeah.
And we're like, I don't know, this is weird. And so we're like bouncing around on it. We're like, well, we're not going through.
And we saw old tracks. in
old
there,
tracks
yeah.
from a skidder, one of those pieces of equipment that drags the logs through. That's what I'm thinking it was, because the tires were probably that wide.
Yeah, they were
And
big.
he only sunk 6 inches or so. It's like, okay, we probably can function through this.
Yeah.
And ultimately, your dad just decided to send it with the FJ,
Yeah.
and we have some footage of that. It's
Yeah.
kind of cool, just ripping through there.
And it was actually there was no
Nothing.
issues. Yeah,
No
there's
issues.
nothing.
The-
I was a little bit concerned. I was like, because first of all, if somehow we got stuck, there's no good way to pull any of us out.
I'd have to
So,
pull you from the rear,
Yeah.
which isn't. I mean, I've been there. We've
Yeah.
done it. We had the recovery straps and stuff. We could have done it. We had max tracks. You have a winch, but there's nothing to winch off of
Yeah,
out there.
Yeah,
We had options, but it wouldn't have been great.
Yeah.
No matter what, it would have been pretty bad. But yeah, no issues
but
there.
yeah, I'm glad we did go through that.
Yeah, it just truly being in the wilderness with zero trail. I've
Yeah.
never experienced something like being in the middle of nowhere. You're 200 miles or whatever from anything else. It's going to take you that many miles to even get back to civilization, and you're just in the wilderness. Like, think about that. Just
And
like
it adds an extra layer of like risk almost, because like there's less stuff that I would have wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because how far we were out, but
yeah, for sure. And that second vehicle, that second group of people, the second sets of tools, the extra equipment, that enables us to be able to take some of those calculated risks
Yeah.
without actually risking too much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, onward, we found that path, continue where you were going.
So I guess this would be what, day 3?
Well, which one? So we had the Pleasant Pond, we had the bear situation, which was
Oh,
funny.
Yeah.
Woke up in the morning to some kind of crashing. I was sort of like out of it.
Yeah.
I think you and your dad heard more of it.
Yeah, we were trying to find it,
But anyway, that's another reason why I like the rooftop tent, because you're elevated.
Yeah.
You're up in the air. Not that a bear couldn't shake your vehicle or do something like that, but I slept with my 45-70. I was
Yeah.
like, hey, if a bear has the balls
like
to
we'd
get
be
up
good.
here and like try to scratch through the tent, I'm sending a 405 grain round right into his face.
Yeah.
Like, bad idea. Boom.
Take him out.
Had the cannon with me. But at the end of the day, the rooftop tents give me a little bit of a comfort level. Being not on the ground, you have a little bit of a defense mechanism in that. So we continued onward. We did, what did we say, about 70 miles?
Yeah, something
that
like
day?
that.
This was the day we ended
Oh.
up at one of the most
Yeah.
epic locations. So
100%.
go into that a little bit.
So it was same situation. A whole bunch of roads were closed and bridges were out, and we went down these trails, and they were not trails at the end of it. But eventually, we found a route kind of where I wanted to go, but we couldn't actually find the spot, like where there were. I had a waypoint. There was supposed to be a campsite.
Yep.
There was not.
There was not a
Yeah, there was nothing there. So we drove.
Go figure.
Yeah, we drove out and around, and we just came across this lake, and we drove out, and there was like, this is really weird. There was like campers there.
Yeah.
Which I found super odd. I don't even know how.
How the heck they got?
I don't know. I have no clue.
Like full out campers,
Yeah.
talking like 20 feet minimum. Some of them are probably like 32 footers or something big, like big campers.
Yeah.
Somehow somebody was crazy enough to put them there.
Yeah. And I guess there was a main road near there. Like it would be a pain in the butt, but
I wouldn't have wanted to do.
Yeah, no, me neither. But anyways, we got out and we came to the shoreline. There's a whole bunch of there's a rocky shoreline, and it was super cool. As soon as we got out there, we could get like a 270-degree view
Oh, it was
of everything,
beautiful.
the mountains, the lake, and the sunset was amazing. But my favorite part of that night was the Northern Lights.
Yep.
I was so surprised. In Maine, occasionally I've heard you can hear or see the Northern Lights, and I was just kind of looking out in the distance and I saw this like little streak, and then you got your binos out.
Yeah, so I had my night vision.
Yeah. And it was so easy to see with
Yep.
those things.
It's like, yep, that is definitely the Northern Lights.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it because you had said something. Maybe we'll see the Northern Lights. Like, whatever. you
Yeah.
know,
I was like,
Northern
yeah.
Lights, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. More conspiracy theories over here. But yeah, we saw them. That was
Yeah.
pretty cool. That was a good night.
Yeah.
We picked up driftwood on the side of the lake.
Yeah.
We had a big fire. You know, as a father, I brought my 4-year-old. I touched on that a little bit, but
yeah.
I haven't talked too much about that.
Yeah, we should talk on that because he was amazing.
Yeah.
I don't understand. He's like the
4 years
best
old.
behaved
That
kid.
night it was around 24 degrees.
Yeah.
Very cold, and that's Fahrenheit for all you Celsius weirdos out there. Very cold. But that lake, I feel like Colin opened up.
Yeah.
On that night. You know, he was a little shy, you know, interacting with you and your dad. Obviously, anytime he's around older men, you know, being a young boy, you're always like establishing that pecking order, trying to figure out like, how can I be a man?
Yeah.
And this trip, I framed it for Colin as this is essentially his initiation to becoming a man.
Yeah.
And that was our conversations as we were driving. We talked about what it takes to be a man. We talked about, you know, how we can lead, how we can be a community leader, how we can impact others, how we can be a part of a tribe. And so it's hilarious because when I talk to Colin, I show him a picture of that lake. He literally said this. So I sent a picture to Jess. It's my screen background on my MacBook, and it's of Colin sitting at this lake. I sent that picture to Jess. I was like, hey, just let Colin know that he's the background on my computer because I knew that would be important to him. And Colin's words to Jess were, hey, Mom, that's the frozen lake where I became a man. And you
That's
think
awesome.
about the
That's
fact that my
hilarious.
4-year-old, he now sees himself as a powerful figure. He's
Yeah.
this little
Yeah.
dude. He couldn't break a twig half the time, but he in his heart says, I accomplished something and I became a man on this trip. And man, how powerful as fathers when we can take our young men on a trip where they feel like they are men. And in a lot of ways, he did something many people won't even ever do.
Yeah.
He literally was in the cold. He didn't have a bath. He had to brush his teeth and get changed in 30-degree or less weather. You know, it was challenging. It wasn't easy for him, and he became a man.
Yeah.
And that night, watching him play, you know, we kind of left him run free. We gave him a headlamp, and he would go 50 yards away and throw rocks in the lake, and then he'd come running back. And thinking back, I'm like, I can't believe that didn't worry me. Like, he's
Yeah.
disappearing in total darkness with a little freaking headlamp, throwing rocks in this lake. I'm like, there could have been bears, there could have been coyotes, wolves maybe that north. I don't know.
Yeah.
Are there mountain lions up there? I was like, I was thinking the other night, it's like, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I took a risk letting him experience the world without boundaries. You know what I mean? Now, I would shine my light every once in a while and be like, hey, where is he? And he had this jacket. I specifically brought this jacket. It's a fireman jacket for a kid. It's got reflective strips on it.
You could see him
So
from like a
I'd,
mile
I'd
away.
hit him with the cloud defensive rain light, and I'd see the little reflection out there. Oh, he's good. He's still alive. He's upright. Nothing took him.
Yeah.
Good to go. He'd be singing and throwing rocks in the water. He found this little piece of driftwood. He calls
yeah.
it Bodie.
Bodie. Forgot about Bodie.
He calls it Bodie. It's this little piece of driftwood that it like has a handle, and it looks like this like jet ski. And he'd sit on it in the sand and make boat noises and act like he's floating around in the water. And he'd tell these tall tales about how he cruised across the lake. And man, as a father, it was just like this. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I feel like I led him well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like I had an opportunity to impact my son through overlanding, which is probably why now I have this sort of addiction with
Yeah.
overlanding. So let's talk about the morning that we woke up, because that was also impactful. You woke up
Yeah.
early, flew the drone, same location that we're just talking about, but
Yeah, so that was, what was that, like 24 degrees? That was cold. And I knew it would be cold up there, and I thought I was prepared, but I didn't. I should have brought more clothes, like base layers. So that's the one thing that kind of I learned. But yeah, it was very cold. We packed up, and from there we just drove to Baxter. That was a pretty easy day. We didn't really do much like off-road. The trail getting out of there was like muddy, but that was about it.
yeah.
A lot of big puddles and stuff. But yeah, I would say that's probably the tamest day. We didn't really do much, like, I would say, off-roading.
Yeah.
But
And then really that was kind of our, kind of the trip. That was like the climactic event, you know what I mean? Like, hey,
Yeah.
we got out of this epic lake, we're heading back. And from there, it's kind of journeying back home, which I was actually sort of refreshed about. The whole time
Yeah.
we're kind of beating on our vehicles. I'm like, well, we're kind of on the way back. I'm kind of ready to hit the highway and head back. Would you say the same thing? Kind of at the end of
Yeah,
the trip, we're
I
like, hey,
think
let's,
yeah, especially once we saw the things that we wanted to see,
yeah,
it was kind of like, yeah, it's time to get back. Now obviously I think we could have, with our rigs and what we had, we probably could have gone for longer. And I know we will eventually, but
yeah.
yeah, it was.
Oh, Alaska's on my
Yes.
checklist.
Oh, I want to go to
I
Alaska
want
so bad.
when we have multiple rigs on our team, like not just the FJ, not just the XJ,
Yeah.
but we have like 4 or 5 different rigs that are really set up. I would love to take the team up to Alaska.
Yeah, that would be an amazing spot. There's a lot of good things up there that, from what I've seen, obviously I've never been up that far, but
So then looking at one of the last things that I did want to talk about the trip from a logistics standpoint is food and fuel. And I feel like the food part was pretty easy.
yeah.
And we packed a cooler. It was an Arctic cooler, packed it full of ice, and we still had ice at the end of the 6 days, which is crazy. But we had fresh food, and then I also packed some of my survival food. It's freeze-dried stuff from My Patriot Supply. It's really good food. It's worked out really well for me over the years, and I like to pack it on trips because you just need to boil water. But the fuel situation was unique.
Yeah, so that was interesting, and that was my biggest thing that I was, when planning, that was my biggest thing, like trying to make sure we, I don't know what the right word is.
Had enough freaking fuel.
Yeah, had enough fuel, yeah. I just had to make sure we had enough fuel.
Because there's no gas stations when you're 200 miles into the wilderness.
And so you had, 4 gallons of diesel extra, the rotor packs?
I had 2 roto packs full of diesel. My tank is like 20 or 21 gallons. We topped off before we hit North Maine woods. And
yeah, and I would say you had the biggest advantage with diesel, because you're getting what, like probably 22 on the trails?
So no, I did 22 on the highway was my
22 on the
average.
highway,
Now I
okay.
think I didn't weigh my Jeep. I'm estimating that packed I was around 6,000 pounds with the whole Jeep, the rooftop tent, the spare tire, fuel, tools, food, everything. I'm thinking around 6,000 pounds. 22 miles per gallon was about the average on the highway, doing 70 miles an hour. On the trail, I averaged 19.
Okay, and that's still amazing, because we were like 14 and a half.
Yeah.
So, and I knew that going in, that the FJ is not the most fuel efficient. So we had 8 gallons, we had 4 rotor packs, and yeah, that was, after the first 2 days, we really sat down and kind of like looked at the maps, made sure we were good. And in the end, we're like, yeah, we'll be fine for fuel. And it actually worked out well. I had a little over a quarter once we had gas. But
yeah, but I think I was just below half tank. I could have gone for quite a bit more. That's one of those things we talked about, vehicles not overwhelming yourself. Definitely take the time to bring fuel and food. Do not skimp on those two things.
Two biggest
Whether
things.
your vehicle, have big lift kits or not, I don't care.
Yeah.
But food, fuel. And that is huge, because when you get stuck out there with a vehicle of some sort, I mean, we did see some people on some of the main logging roads, but
yeah, for the first day we saw, I don't know, maybe 15 cars, if that, because that is the busy season because of hunting. But
it was
after
moose
that
season, and there were people hunting rough grouse and stuff.
Yeah, but after that, we didn't see many people at all, because we were pretty far out at that point.
So if you run out of fuel because of bad prep, you're on your own.
Yeah.
You're going to be
walking.
figuring out how to refine your own oil in the middle of nowhere. Or you're going to be walking. You'll be walking. But that was the other funny thing is, with a mechanical indirect injected diesel like mine, it was funny. I brought 2.5 gallons of motor oil with me just to top off the Jeep, because it leaks a little bit of oil, burns a little bit of oil. but I could run that.
Yeah.
I could
That
dilute
is
that
the
with a little bit of
advantage.
gasoline. There's tons of write-ups of people taking essentially a gallon of gasoline, diluting it with a quart of diesel oil, mixing it together and running it
It's
in these
crazy.
IDIs. You can run kerosene, you can run ATF, you can run all kinds of different stuff through that engine because of how it's designed. I'm not going to say it's going to run the best,
But
but
it'll get you
I
out of the
had spare
situation.
oil. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's technically, I had 2.5 gallons
Yeah.
of oil. You can run straight used motor oil if you want. It's going to smell
crazy.
weird and be gross, but you can do it.
Yeah.
So there's an advantage, and I set my Jeep up specifically to achieve those different advantages. But looking at the trip, okay, we're kind of going to close this out, and I think we could tell stories about this
Yeah.
forever.
Probably go for a while.
And honestly,
yeah.
there's going to be other podcasts that we're going to touch on certain aspects of this trip. What do you think was your takeaway, the biggest thing you walked away with from this trip?
I think the biggest thing that I walked away with is one, that there is areas semi nearby that we can go just explore and have fun.
On the East Coast,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think the second biggest thing is I also learned to, I would probably say, take better risks. I don't know what the right word is
Maybe
for
not
that.
bigger,
Yeah.
necessarily bigger, but be willing maybe.
Yeah, like take risks that are, it makes sense to take them. Like you said, like I'm not, like I am a risk taker, but I will be pretty careful about stuff. And I kind of trying to learn to relax that a little bit. Try to learn to take, more risks, see better things, like
Yeah.
as far as going farther and stuff. But
Yeah, I think for me the takeaway was, I was debating the whole time. I actually asked my oldest son if he would want to come with me, and he's very risk averse. He doesn't like to take risks. He likes the order, you know what I mean? And he was very concerned, and because of that, I decided to offer it to Colin, who's my second youngest, and Bennett decided he would rather stay home and protect his mom, which he's a
Yeah.
very good protector.
and that's cool too.
He really wants to stay and keep the homestead good. He wants to make sure the red dots are turned on the side arms and that the doors are locked. Like, he'll check the windows at night. He is very much a protector, but it holds him back. And as he grows older, he's going to have to learn how to break out of a lot of that.
Yeah.
Now he wants to go.
Yeah.
Now that
Yeah,
he's
now he
seen
wants-
the
yeah.
pictures, he's seen what Colin experienced, he's jealous. And there's actually a couple days after the trip where he was really bummed out because he didn't go. And I just told him, I was like, look, dude, that's a lesson. Yes, you should be bummed out because I offered it to you. And I mean, this sounds like I'm being a jerk, but at the same
It's
time,
truth,
I
yeah.
didn't coddle him or like, carefully drive him through this. I just said, yeah, dude, it kind of sucks that you didn't go. That's your fault.
Yeah.
You decided not to go on this trip because of fear. Fear held you back, and he's going to be turning 8. He's old enough to understand there's some consequences to our choices, not necessarily punishments, but consequences to that choice. You didn't get to experience something that Colin and I got to experience. However, there's many more trips coming.
Yeah.
And I hope that you want to be on that next trip. And he was like, oh yeah, I want to be there. And he's like, well, can Colin come too?
That's awesome.
It's like, okay, well, I'm going to
That's
fit
cool.
two
Two
kids in
kids,
this
yeah.
rooftop tent with me, which is fine. They're like half human
Yeah.
right now. They're half size. So we can just fit.
Yeah, and then once we refine our systems, we'll have more room.
Yeah, for sure.
But-
and so, I think my takeaway was I was nervous to just toss my sons into this total unknown.
Yeah.
But I'm really, really thankful that I decided to take
Yeah.
a 4-year-old overlanding.
Yeah.
And I have a video that I'm working on that's going to be talking about that. I think I'm just going to title it, I took my 4-year-old overlanding. And it's just speaking to the fact that it went very differently than what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And in some ways there were challenges. Like, if I would have been alone, I would have been more present with you and your dad, helping to pack up camp and helping to cook and helping to do all this stuff. I was in dad mode the entire time, making sure Colin was taken care of. And as a parent, you end up sacrificing often your own things that you want to do to be able to take care of your children. That's just the nature of parenting. And I had to do that on this trip, but it gave me a perspective from this trip that I don't think I would have had on my own. It gave me an appreciation of the trip. And I'm very thankful that we got to experience that. And I had that bonding moment with my son.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing probably for both of us is, it definitely got me hooked on that, because like I said, that was the first long period of time where I was out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So
the last thing I want to do, what are you going to change with your vehicle next time?
the biggest thing that I realized is interior. I want to change the interior. I want to do a 60% seat delete. So basically take out 60% of the back seat and build a little like deck and platform. And you can actually put like a little bed on it if you want, which is kind of cool.
Nice.
But but yeah, basically drawers with storage, that's like the biggest thing. I want to be able to store like everyday things, especially cooking items. I think that was the biggest pain
Yeah, it
is trying to pull
sucked.
out our bins of cooking items and then sort through them all just to get what we needed. And it made cooking like take probably 2 or 3 times as much, like take that much time more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing I want to change is just storage in general, not even just that, but just learning how to pack.
Yeah.
But
I think I would echo that. I think I came heavy with clothing. I came heavy with other gear that I didn't need. And the hard part is maybe another trip I would have
yeah,
needed it.
maybe you would have needed
You
it. Yeah.
don't know. So one of the things that I'm going to do as well is delete the seat before the next trip in the back completely. Even if it's just a little insert that allows me to have a total flat bed essentially in the back that I can
Yeah.
pack things, because every time I parked, I had to unload everything to get to the things that I needed.
Yeah.
Now, by the end of the trip, I had a better system. I was able to pack the Jeep in a way that made more sense, but I was removing everything all the time. So interior storage, that's my next move. Um, I did have a bit of an interesting
With the
situation with
bump
my Jeep,
stops.
and then before we're gonna wind this podcast episode down. We're right at about an hour at this point. Um, but my Jeep's leaf springs in the back. I've had those springs on this Jeep for many years. They've been off-roading, all kinds of different trips. I loaded down that Jeep, and it was only about an inch and a half off the bump stops. And there were many times I slammed into those bump stops on these back roads to the point where I didn't realize it, but my unibody had some rust hidden behind the bump stop. And on one of these occasions, I just felt the Jeep slam into the bump stop on the driver's or the passenger side, and I heard a crunch. And I was like, oh no. And I hopped out. I had us pull over, hopped out. I couldn't see because of the mud. Later that night, I looked closer. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah, that
That
was
just waffled my unibody. It pushed it up by about an inch. Now I fixed it. Everything's done. I've got new leaf springs, add leaves, new bushings, everything on the Jeep. Everything's fixed now. But in the moment, that was kind of a little bit of stress.
Yeah.
Seeing like I didn't prep my vehicle quite right. And I had debated. I was like, man, I want to replace the springs. I almost bought new springs, almost bought the bushing kit, almost bought the add leaves. We talked about it a little bit. And I
Yeah.
decided against it. Didn't want to spend the extra $500 right then. But I wish I would have. But now it's set up.
Yeah,
Now
and
we're
I
good
think
to
that's
go.
probably the first time that you've loaded that thing that heavy for that amount of time.
Yeah.
So,
But all in all, I think I'd rate that trip a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think it was a good experience for you and I. I mean, we work together every single day. We're around each other. I mean, not every day, but Monday through Friday, we're around each other. And then trips like this, we spend 4 or 5 days, 24 hours a
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
together. But it was a unique experience where we did film it. We did work stuff,
Yeah.
but it was also a personal experience.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I'm grateful for the trip. And I think it was a good.
Yeah,
it
I'm
was
glad we were able to make it happen.
So, guys, wrapping up the podcast, unless you have anything else,
Yeah, that's it.
wrapping this out, I do want to thank you for listening to the podcast. As always, guys, we'd appreciate you sharing this podcast with your friends and family. And I just want to do some housekeeping here at the end of this podcast because there's a couple of different ways that you can support us. One of the things you're not going to see on this podcast is us running ad space for other people. Unless it's a friend that we really believe in what they're doing, but I would rather get that friend on the podcast to learn about what they do rather than push just nonsense ads on you guys. So that's one of our hard stops that we have. But there are ways that you can support us without us just spamming you. Our company is about changing culture. The Exodus Companies is all about building a community, changing culture, impacting the world around us. So whether that means you buy something from us or not, we don't care. What we want to see you do is share this podcast with somebody around you. So right now, if you made it to this point, we appreciate that. But please take a moment, copy, paste the link, kick it over to 4 or 5 of your buddies, let them know who the Exodus Companies are and what we're about. And then at the end of the day, if you really love what this message is about, one of the ways that you could impact the community in a passive way is through our apparel line that we have coming out. And that, again, is a way that you can support us, allow us to continue making these podcasts, but have messages like the sweatshirt that I have on here, where it speaks into culture. And look, we understand that everybody's a little bit different. We understand that our viewpoints may not line up perfectly with each other, but we do believe that there's something missing in culture. And we think that through our company, we have a unique ability and a unique capability to reach into the world, speak the truth as we know it, and impact those around us. And what we want to see is communities thriving. We want to see people in their own spaces thriving, and we want a reset of culture so we can get away from just this chaotic environment where everybody just wants everybody divided. And look, I'm not looking for this like, oh, blissful unity. I'm not naive to understand that this world can be crazy and violent and chaotic. But I also know that there's a human element to this where we've been corrupted. We have our culture in general has been corrupted from the inside out. We want to impact that and make a change to culture. So if you like what you're seeing, spreading the word is the best way you can do it. And if you are blessed with some financial capabilities and you want to rep our gear or our products, we've got lots of brands that can impact you and help you live a better life and become a better asset in your community across the board. And you will learn about that as we go forward. But we appreciate you guys tuning into this episode. We'll see you in the next one. Hope you guys stay well. Take care.